Hello and welcome to our Built on SailPoint series. I'm Neal Kaye, Vice President of Global Delivery Services here at SailPoint. In this series, we discuss Identity Security Cloud, product extensions, tools, processes that leverage the Atlas platform. We deep dive into our clients' security goals with an aim to defend against today's identity-centric threats. Today, I am excited to welcome Tim Corder, Managing Director for Deloitte, to our series. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Neal. Happy to be here.
Deloitte is one of 3 SailPoint partners to maintain Global Delivery Admiral status and is featured today to discuss the development of a new digital experience that complements SailPoint's Atlas platform and provides extensibility to SailPoint's Identity Security Cloud solution. Deloitte's solution is referred to as the Service Center and reinvents how to drive stakeholder engagement and organizational adoption of SailPoint's identity solutions. So we're just going to straight dive in here. As a SailPoint Delivery Admiral partner, you've built solutions to address unique customer problems. Can you give us an overview of Deloitte's Service Center and how it helps automate the end-to-end application onboarding process?
Yeah, really the genesis of Service Center was kind of observing a number of our engagements in terms of where we're delivering app onboarding or various transformation projects, even compliance projects, and we realized that what was kind of common in all these engagements was a lot of sitting down with application teams, carving out a lot of time in their schedules, a lot of spreadsheet-based interaction, a lot of kind of manual process, and kind of going through that methodology and an approach. And we realized that maybe there's kind of a better way to do this. And could we really reimagine these methodologies that we developed over the years in a kind of reimagine through a digital experience? And really the goal was recognizing that the stakeholders, the application owners that we're working with, day in and day out with, they have a lot of other competing demands on their time. We show up there, ready to work a full day, but this is just one of many projects they're supporting. So could we make this easier for them? Could we give them a more curated experience? Could we let them work on their own time? Could we engage them just for that kind of critical decision or input that is needed to move the process along, and then go back to driving value for our client organizations? So that was really the genesis of the Service Center, is kind of taking practices and approaches and methodologies that we already were delivering to clients, reimagining through a digital experience to really drive a much better experience for our clients, and especially those application teams that we work with on all these different engagements.
Sounds fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about how Service Center integrates with ISC?
Yeah, so Service Center has a lot of different integrations, but kind of through ISC is through a REST interface. The move to cloud has been huge for us. Our Service Center platform is a SaaS platform, sits out on the internet, but also as we've been on that journey with you from IIQ to IDN through ISC, and we've even had integrations with IIQ. And what Atlas has enabled us to do is, by exposing these interfaces, by really enhancing those interfaces, providing a lot more capabilities that we can integrate with, we can drive a lot more automation, a lot more value to clients. So rather than doing just kind of all this upfront orchestration work and then handing it over to an engineer to go and code it in the application, we can actually talk directly to the Atlas platform. Are we going to implement every single use case, every type of connector? No. I mean, we're smart about what are the high value, the frequently used connectors. That kind of 80-20% rule. That's kind of what we're optimizing on. But that's really what it's about. And you're moving to Atlas SaaS platform and thinking and really doubling down on the APIs and the richness of the capabilities, read-write capabilities exposed to those APIs, has really enabled us to provide a lot more value through our solution, which is really optimizing on the processes that we follow and that we use to enable our clients on your solution.
So let me deep dive into that just a little bit. So You guys were one of the pioneers in, I'll call it the digital experience around application onboarding. I remember when you first brought it out for IIQ, just how revolutionary it was. Nobody had really thought to do that. It really was a spreadsheet world before that. So, what challenges are you addressing today? How has it evolved over time? What does that look like?
Yeah, one of the challenges is when you're dealing with these different application owners, they have different levels of expertise. You will have some application teams that are just very low level. They know how accounts are provisioned in their application. They know how entitlements are structured. And then you have kind of the other extreme of you have application owners that they may be some executive within the organization and they own the risk for the application, but they're not technical at all. So the challenge has always been how do we, solve those very kind of disparate type, you know, uh, challenges for different types of stakeholders that come, very different sides of the spectrum in terms of their technical capability. So it's really about having a solution that's very flexible. And what that means is very curated, uh, different clients see different interfaces, different stakeholders see different types of interfaces. Sometimes the workflow will start with the IAM team and then go to the application team, and the application team is just reviewing the requirements. Other times it'll go straight to the application team because they're super technical, or will provide the ability for the application owner to delegate the completing certain elements of the intake, the discovery process with different uh, users. And that's really been where we try to optimize is recognizing that every client's different, and even within clients, stakeholders need a different experience. Sometimes it's context sensitive help. Sometimes it's ability to add comments and then check off that the comment was addressed, almost like a blog, and really being able to pivot over time and do it in a way that's sustainable. I mean, you're a product company, you live and breathe this, but it's always a calculation of we can't just build it for one client. We've got to build it for more. We're not solving this for thousands of clients like you are. We're solving it for a much smaller base. So we have a little more flexibility to make a more, kind of custom solution, if you will. But that's always kind of that line we're walking is how do we make it really curated, use the client's language, really calibrated to the expert, the level of knowledge, technical expertise of the client, but also have a solution that's sustainable that we can then go to future clients and it, provide value and that we can maintain it.
So, since we're talking a little bit on the tech side, you happen to mention that the integration is via REST. You've created a full blown SaaS tool. Is there anything else you can tell us about kind of the technologies and frameworks you've already leveraged for this?
Yeah, so it's just a Node.js next React application. We really rely heavily on third-party solutions, and that really just helps us keep our costs down. We run Mongo Atlas in the background. We love the NoSQL document-based database because, again, being flexible for these clients, being able to really extend that schema has been very helpful. But yeah, it's multi-region. We even have it deployed out in Europe. And of course, when you go to Europe, you have to solve GDPR requirements, so your compliance requirements. I know you're already doing this. Is a little bit different. We even deployed it in a GovCloud environment. Again, different set of uh, requirements there. Uh, but yeah, I mean that's kind of a pretty standard stack, back end DevOps team that's maintaining it, fully containerized. And the beauty of the solution is that we've been just like we've been able to add clients and not really have to scale our infrastructure, and that's really the power of having a SaaS multi-tenant solution.
That's fantastic. So, since the original concept was on prem, you've obviously moved it over to SaaS. How did you find the extensibility of Atlas? And was that an easy process to go ahead and migrate over to? Did it take a little bit of finesse and work? What did that look like?
Well, that was easier. When we integrated with IAQ, we literally configured a workflow running in IQ. So you had to make, deploy a change on IQ, and then we would call the workflow that would then go and create the objects. Because on IQ, you don't really have write capabilities, so you have to kind of invoke a workflow that then goes and does the updates. But with the REST interface, we have read write capability. So if we need to go and create the connector objects, create the users, be able to pull down a list of users, and then also assign them as the owner for an application, we're able to do that. And so we're able to populate drop downs, create like access profiles. So it's just a lot richer experience. And then we don't have demands on the client environment. So we don't have to go and change the client environment. We get an API token. So that level of integration, that's a lot easier. Clients don't like it when you have to go in and customize their, it's a really critical piece of infrastructure. They like having it a little bit more decoupled. So that's been, it's been a lot easier to, but it's definitely a different solution, right?
So,
I wouldn't say that we have clients that have both IAQ and Atlas running, and we're not trying to coordinate between the two, but we definitely like solving the Atlas side of the equation more.
so talk to us a little bit about how quickly you can get this up and running with a new client. What does that experience look like?
Yeah, the longest piece is just getting through I'm sure you guys do this too, third-party risk management,
Mhm.
right? And it's a SOC 2 compliant application. We maintain a
Wow.
SOC third-party audited SOC 2 on that. Uh, and we have very standard responses, but it's just going through. We have some clients that they get through it in a week. We've had some of our larger, more regulated clients, they could take up to 12 weeks.
Ooh.
So we've seen, kind of everything within that range. Uh, and that's usually the long pole, if you will, in terms of what really drives the duration. But it's a SaaS solution, so spinning up a tenant's very easy. It's all through the UI. There's not really anything to install or deploy to get that set up. And we spend most of the time just working through what's the client's process, right? What are the notifications? Uh, Getting SSO integrated with their IDP services, and then tailoring that forms and that process to meet their requirements. So we're not sitting there spending time, installing bits and getting software working and infrastructure provision. No, I mean it's really just focused on, once we get through that, client's due diligence in terms of using the asset, then it's really about let's solve your process. Let's figure out what's unique about it. What are the toll gates that you want to enforce in it? What's kind of the language your users prefer, what kind of tweaking the questions that you want them to see, and then configuring it.
That's awesome. Can you walk us through a real world client experience, what it looks like, where have you leveraged it? And then I'll probably drill into a couple of specific questions around that, but let's kind of start there. This is fascinating.
Yeah, well, we had one very large client. They had I would say an audit item that they needed to address, and they had about 3,800 applications. And the immediate requirement was getting access reviews in place. But it wasn't enough just to do an access review. You had to show that the you'd have to do a completeness and accuracy check. So what that means is, just because you kind of check the box that yes, SailPoint's integrated and talking to the application, you have to show that SailPoint's record of the applications is complete and accurate with what is actually on the system. So because there could be some accounts, maybe correlation rules or aggregation rules that some things missed that are on that endpoint system that may not be showing up in SailPoint. So there's an additional step to go through and confirm that completeness. And they had like a 95% threshold that had to be met. So we deployed Service Center, and this was actually our first client. Of course, we picked the biggest one to start with, kind of our first client. And part of our contractual commitment was they would have an automated solution to handle this onboarding process and to do the completeness and accuracy check at the end. So it goes through the process of, and it's just solving that use case, going through and doing access reviews. And at the end of it, it's tracking evidence from the application team, looking at what's in SailPoint, and then, kind of confirming that match. And then once that 95% threshold is met, then, that's a go for that application. They built on that. They need to do these completeness accuracy checks on an annual basis.
Oh, wow.
So they have some thousand applications that are high risk that are in scope for that completeness and accuracy check. So we have about 250 application teams every quarter going through, and it's a separate process where they're going through and confirming that everything matches. And they have to do this on an annual basis. Look in SailPoint, is SailPoint, this is what's in SailPoint, this is what's on the system, here's the discrepancy or not, and then sign off on that. And they go through that. That was really cool because they had a SharePoint based process to do that before. And with our tool, they actually cut out about 50% of their hours and calendar time from this online email based process to using a tool that just orchestrates it end to end. So that clients, they've been, very happy with that solution, and now they're looking at access request and PAM as well, privileged access management. The good thing with the tool is that we don't have to do all the use cases at one time. You can just do access review now, and then months or even years later, come back and do the other use cases, and you don't lose your information. It's all there. All the data's there. We're not asking the same questions over and over again because everyone's different, right? On their side, after there's turnover, we have a different project team most likely that's delivering that work. They just pick up from where they left off, and so that's been very valuable for them.
It's interesting that last point I kind of want to touch on just because, you get into some of these projects and, you can be talking 2 or 3 years, right? They're not short projects. So just the ability for someone to pick up where somebody else left off and have all the notes and have all the original data, that's incredible. And that happens both, client side and consulting side. So that's
Yeah.
incredible. Super helpful. So let's dive into some metrics. What does this look like from a key performance indicator standpoint? How do you measure success when you get into these projects?
Yeah, so there are a lot of kind of interesting elements. Clearly, the acceleration, especially on like these compliance processes, on the IGA projects, we're able to shift our talent hours away from kind of traditional BA work. So if you look at kind of how we deliver these projects, there's kind of an on-site component, and then there's a lot of offshore, right? And the on-site component is the high touch, kind of the white glove, if you will, engaging with the application team, sitting down, gathering all the requirements, and then kind of the project management, reporting, statusing, dashboard. And then the once the work's kind of ready to go, then we have that, kind of an offshore team that's super technical, and they go off and they can go build that, they'll generate the artifacts. The tooling enables us to shift hours away from that analyst work, and those analysts, they're expensive because they're typically onshore, on site. So that's been a significant hours and cost reduction for clients from a KPI perspective. When we go into projects now, if you look at the cost per application, it's significantly different between a traditional white glove service and using the asset, because we make assumptions around, with white glove, sure, we'll staff a whole US based, local team, but you're going to spend thousands of dollars, plenty of money per application, and that goes up based on the complexity of the app. Now, when we go to this, kind of the tool enable model, we really shorten that kind of pilot. So we'll do a kind of a one-time pilot, work out the patterns, get the process in place, and then we really wind down that US component. And then you're going to probably see like a fifth or fourth the cost per
Oh,
application when we move to that online, because we're not having to staff the same teams,
sure.
right? We're interacting with the client, and interestingly, a lot of the clients, they have offshore teams too, so it's not like it's super inconvenient. I mean, they'll be in Pune and Hyderabad as well, the application teams that we're working with. But even if not, they're still going through this kind of orchestrated kind of single portal to collect all information, and it's been, a lot more time efficient and cost efficient for our
I mean,
clients.
if you're getting below 25% the amount of time it would take to do this the more traditional way, that's an amazing savings. I mean, 75% off the top, not to mention, leveraging an offshore model, that's incredible. So can you share any success stories, right? So we've kind of hit on one, your first big client. Anything else that kind of highlights some of these metrics, how fast you're able to run, anything like that?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, we kind of see these same metrics. It's usually we have one small actually it's a it's a multi-regional bank, not an international bank, but a multi-regional bank that had a bunch of SOX issues. We were able to crank through a bunch of their applications with kind of that more leveraged model. So you might see like a project where you have one US person and maybe 10 offshore, which typically without a tool, it's going to be more like a 40-60 maybe model. So that was a lot more, um, kind of cost effective. We're solving an interesting case for a client in Germany, a very large client. So they have a regulatory regime they have to go through, and their application teams, they have to generate these artifacts. They call them authorization concepts. They were doing this manually, and it's this really hairy Word document that every application team has to go through and update. Here are my controls. Here are my accounts, my roles, my entitlements. Here's how I do logging for my. It's really ugly, and it's unstructured data. So if you think about it, if the template changes, a human has to go in and update that again. Now with our tool, we store that in a very structured format, and then we generate whatever template they need. So what happens is now those teams are not spending any time generating Word documents, those really busy application teams. We're just generating those artifacts for them. And then, maybe another client, it's kind of an SSO world, not necessarily IGA world, but kind of an interesting case study around, honestly, the less we can engage application teams, the faster we go. Let's be real, right? And everyone wants that, right? Application teams are busy; they don't want to be doing, security compliance processes. We're migrating, what is it, 2,250 applications from a legacy SSO solution to a modern SaaS SSO solution. And interestingly, we are doing everything, including the API test, like the handshake test,
Mm-hmm.
or the kind of authentication handshake test. We're able to move all those configs over without engaging the application teams.
Wow.
And so then application teams, they'll do a little bit of cutover at their own time, but all the client has to pay for is just bring us in to go and move all the configs over, and then just some office hours to kind of shepherd the apps through. But it was the only way that we could get over 2,000 applications migrated in just a year. And we anticipate that we'll be able to finish those configs based on the progress to date, because we're doing like several hundred apps a month, if you can imagine
Wow.
moving their configs over. We'll probably finish kind of in the April-May timeframe, and then just have office hours, just to support application teams as they have questions. But all that stuff's moved over, and it's all automated. We generated the artifacts, the requirements artifact, that's automatically generated. Human doesn't have to do that. We generated also the test artifacts, so like screenshots, right?
Wow.
The handshake test and stuff. And that's, again, you multiply, for 5 apps, sure, I can just do that. But when you're talking about 2,000 apps plus doing that for each app, that's been really huge. So
That's incredible. So tell me what's next. What is it, what does the roadmap for Service Center look like at Deloitte?
well, we realized that, with the tool, you have workflow, you have notifications, you have a lot of the building blocks. There's really any kind of process that you can kind of tackle that is onboarding or transformation. One of the things we're looking at is zero trust type initiatives. So as you look at moving to zero standing privileges, or moving to like a SASE type solution, where trying to figure out how to have your app doesn't have to sit behind the firewall, it can be exposed through the internet, but also properly secured from an endpoint perspective. We're also looking at some interesting AI pieces as well, because as we look at, again, I'd mentioned the kind of that intake process. Application teams, they kind of, depending on the person, they're not going to necessarily know, what is the redirect URI, or are my accounts stored in AD? What does that mean? Or how do I manage what are groups and entitlements? So we're looking at some interesting AI integration to, kind of curate that a little bit. So it could be well, what is this? And provide some interaction with, application teams. So we're really just kind of, trying to make that easier. Also looking at kind of interesting AI elements in terms of ingesting existing artifacts. So that example I used where, there's already a requirements definition or authorization concept, And application teams, the last thing they want to do is regenerate the same information, but we need it in some structured format to do something with it. So ingesting that as well are the areas that we're looking at. But yeah, and then we're solving interesting things as we go outside of the U.S. Clients in the Middle East, UAE, as well as Europe. So really expanding kind of the reach, and all those different regions have, of course, different regulatory requirements. So yeah.
We've talked a little bit about application onboarding, but it sounds like this tool can do a whole lot more. Can you highlight some of the other features and how they help out your clients?
Yeah, because we realize, we set out to solve the app onboarding challenge, but what we have is a great workflow, forms, notification, email type engine, and it's very flexible to solve a lot of different use cases. We also realize that as you're working with these application teams, yeah, they're dealing with application onboarding, but they're also dealing with product migrations. They are dealing with zero trust transformations, and they're dealing with all these various compliance processes, these application teams. So they have all these different demands on their time, and we realize, well, why can't we solve some of these others? So as we look to zero trust transformation, as we look for migrating products, as we look at migrating apps, like for a directory consolidation, you kind of go through a sequence of steps. What are all my dependencies? It's always that application owner that's the star of the show. We always kind of really stay centered on that and realize they have all these other challenges. Can we just solve all those kind of painful challenges that they have so we can free them up to do things that are frankly more interesting? They have clients that they want to serve. They have things that they want to do. And that's really what been our focus is. What are all these different processes they go through, whether it's onboarding, transformation, compliance related, and really orchestrating it through our platform.
Sounds absolutely incredible. I always have lengthy conversations with clients about what a project's going to look like. They get caught on kind of what the first 3 to 6, even 9 to 12 months look like, and then they get to year 2 and they're like, oh, I have this other 1,000 applications that now need to come on board now that I've taken care of my SOX applications or whatever those critical applications are. And they start to take a look at how long that time frame is going to take. And absolutely any innovation around shortening that time frame just makes all the difference in terms of, obviously time to value is the easy one, but just getting stakeholder buy-in, right? If you can shrink that time, increase adoption, move things faster, helps out every single program. So huge thank you for your time today, Tim. And obviously, if you need to get in touch, and learn more about this tool, I assume they can reach out to you. Is there an easy way to get to you or the Deloitte team?
Yeah, I mean, I think just through my email for sure, and look me up on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. Obviously, so do our viewers. I think the information was incredible. Certainly, if you're looking for a quick time to value on your application onboarding, reach out to Tim and the entire Deloitte team. But huge thank you, Tim, and have a wonderful day.